Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands.
That gnawing frustration when you've poured every ounce of effort into something, maybe a project, a relationship, a personal goal, but it feels like you're just hitting a brick wall.
Absolutely. That feeling is incredibly common.
And it's that crushing sense of futility, right? Where every single effort seems to just bounce off some invisible, impenetrable barrier, leaving you wondering if maybe giving up is the only sane, logical option left.
Exactly. It feels like the only rational response sometimes.
It's a feeling that can truly paralyze you, I think. It leaves you stuck in this loop of inaction.
But what's truly fascinating here, though, and quite profound, is that this isn't just, a fleeting emotional state, a moment of passing despair.
Feels deeper than that.
It is. It's a deeply wired psychological phenomenon, actually a learned response. And it was first identified through some truly striking and frankly pretty unsettling research involving animals. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of human behavior, it suddenly explains so much about why we might find ourselves stuck, unable to move forward, even when clear solutions, obvious paths to freedom are quite literally right in front of us.
Wow.
It offers a profound, almost uncomfortable insight into the human condition, really.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into learned helplessness. It's a concept that, on the surface, sounds deceptively simple.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, but as you'll discover over the next, say, 20 to 30 minutes, it reveals these profound truths about how we respond to perceived powerlessness.
Right.
Our mission is to trace its surprising origins, explore its insidious impact on our brains and our lives, and most importantly, understand how this deeply ingrained pattern, this sort of invisible cage, can actually be profoundly unlearned.
That's the hopeful part.
Exactly. We'll explore why creatures, including us humans, might stop trying, even when a solution is within reach, and what it truly means to reclaim our sense of agency.
Okay. Where should we begin?
To truly begin our journey, I think we need to set a scene. It's a scene that feels clinical, sterile, almost designed for scientific detachment. Yet it became this unexpected stage for a revelation about suffering, about perseverance, and ultimately about human hope.
Mm.
Imagine, if you will, a room.
Okay.
Its sterility is almost unsettling, blank, stark walls. They offer no comfort, no visual anchor. A low ceiling presses down, adding to this sense of confinement.
Claustrophobic almost.
Yeah, and the cold, unceasing hum of fluorescent light fills the space. It never quite dims. The air is thick with this sharp, clinical smell of antiseptic mixed with metal. It creates an atmosphere that feels less like a place and more like a carefully constructed chamber, observing every breath, every tremor of unease.
Right. So in the precise center of this unsettling space stands a rectangular box.
Okay.
And this isn't just any box. It's divided down the middle by a low barrier, maybe only a foot or so high.
Easily jumpable, then.
Exactly. It's not a formidable wall, certainly not one that would require immense effort to clear. For an animal of a certain size, it's just high enough to mark a boundary, an obstacle that could be easily surmounted in a single fluid motion.
Right.
Into this box, with a gentle hand, a dog is led. Its initial reaction is hesitant, sensing the unfamiliarity, the strangeness of its surroundings.
It's understandable.
It settles on one side, its body tense, alert, its muscles poised. It paces a little, sniffing at the corners of its new, confined world, before finally coming to a stillness, a quiet anticipation of what might come next.
And then the sequence begins. A sound. Mechanical, brief, like a harsh buzzer. A cold, stark signal slicing through the sterile quiet. And then pain. An electric current jolts through the metal floor. The dog yelps. A sharp, piercing sound of pure, instinctive distress. It scrambles frantically, claws skidding uselessly against the unforgiving metal. A desperate, almost primal search for relief, for escape.
A terrible thing to imagine.
It really is. After seconds that must feel like an eternity, the current ends. Silence descends. A brief, blissful relief washes over the animal, its body slumping slightly. But it's fleeting. The shock returns, again and again, at irregular, unpredictable intervals.
No pattern.
No warning, no discernible pattern, just the sound and then the inescapable, relentless pain. Each jolt is a new assault, a fresh wave of agony.
And what is profoundly, tragically unknown to this dog, what it cannot possibly comprehend within the limited scope of its experience, is a fundamental, almost cruel truth about this setup. Escape is, in fact, possible.
Right there.
Right there. All it would have to do is jump. A simple athletic leap over that low partition would instantly carry it to the other side of the box, a side that is completely safe, entirely free from the current, free from the pain.
It's a solution that, to any observer, is glaringly, frustratingly obvious.
Completely. Yet the dog remains unaware, trapped not by bars, but by its very perception of the situation.
And here's where the story takes its chilling turn.
Yeah.
The dog doesn't move. Not anymore.
After all that, it
Oh.
just stops.
Yeah. After enduring repeated, inescapable shocks, a profound, almost imperceptible shift occurs within its very being. It lies down. Its paws are tucked neatly beneath its chest, a gesture of profound submission, almost resignation.
Wow.
Its breathing becomes shallow, barely perceptible, a whisper against the hum of the fluorescent lights. The wide, initially confused eyes, once filled with fear and a desperate search for answers, slowly begin to dull, losing their spark of resistance, their primal drive to escape.
The fight just goes out of it.
Completely. The yelping stops. The frantic scrambling ceases. There is no more resistance, no more struggle, just a quiet, disturbing stillness.
In that quiet, still, agonizing moment, the dog has, in a profound and unconscious way, made a decision. It's not a choice made with language or conscious deliberation or reasoned thought as we understand it.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It's a belief deeply etched into its very nervous system, a conviction that lives in its muscles and its posture and its entire being. Nothing I do will help.
Oh, man.
This, as Martin Seligman and his colleagues would later describe it, was a psychological collapse. It wasn't the physical body breaking down, succumbing to exhaustion.
It wasn't tiredness.
No, it was the profound breaking of the will, the spirit of resistance. The trauma wasn't just in the electric current itself, though that was certainly painful. The true, devastating trauma was in the meaning assigned to it. A complete and utter lack of control, the realization that effort was futile.
It learned it was powerless.
Precisely. This was a creature conditioned into powerlessness. And in that chilling moment, the room, once just an experimental setup, became something far more profound, a mirror, reflecting a deeply human condition, a pattern of despair we see echoed in countless lives.
So this is the profound question. Why didn't the dog move? Why did it lie motionless, seemingly accepting pain, even when an easy escape, a clear path to safety, was literally right there, obvious to any observer?
To truly grasp this unsettling scene, we have to go back in time, right, to what came before this moment of silent resignation. Well, to truly understand how this profound state of helplessness is actually learned. Because as Seligman's groundbreaking research vividly demonstrates, helplessness is never simply born in the moment, out of nowhere. It is always, without exception, a direct product of experience.
It is learned, painstakingly, through repetition.
Indeed. In an earlier phase of the experiment, this very same dog, prior to being placed in the divided box, had been in a different, even more confining apparatus.
Okay.
This time, there was no partition, no other side to jump to, no glimmer of hope for escape. It was just a small, confined chamber with the same metal floor, the same mechanical sound, and the same electric shock.
But no way out.
Crucially, here there was absolutely no way out, no logical avenue for escape, no action, no matter how desperate, that could possibly bring relief. It was a true dead end.
And at first the dog tried. Desperately. You can almost picture its raw, primal struggle. It scratched frantically at the unyielding, cold walls of the chamber.
Trying anything.
Anything.
Yeah.
It turned in frantic, desperate circles, searching for an exit that simply didn't exist. It whined, a plaintive, hopeful sound, a plea for help that never came. Each time the current hit, it responded instinctively, desperately, with action, with struggle, with every fiber of its being, trying to find a way out of the searing pain.
Just pure survival instinct kicking in.
Yeah, its efforts were tireless, its will to survive immense.
But none of it mattered. The pain returned, relentlessly, indifferent to its struggle, unaffected by its desperate attempts, impervious to its cries.
Effort didn't equal outcome?
Not at all. The confined space offered no relief, no logical connection between action and outcome, no escape from the relentless current. It was, as the researchers would observe, a random universe of hurt, a chaotic, unpredictable realm where effort was met only with indifference and continued inescapable pain.
So what happened?
And so, after a long, agonizing period, the trying stopped. The dog lay still. Not because it was tired, not from physical exhaustion, not from a lack of innate drive, but because it had learned something fundamental, devastating, and deeply cynical.
What was that?
Not merely that pain exists, but that agency does not. It learned that its actions had no impact. Its struggles were in vain.
This experience taught the dog a profound and crippling rule. My actions have no effect.
Right.
And even more deeply, a chilling understanding settled in. The world will hurt me no matter what I do.
And this belief, this devastating understanding of powerlessness, doesn't remain at a superficial conscious level. It burrows deep. It embeds itself into reflexes, into the very automatic responses of the nervous system.
Changes how it exists.
Exactly. It shapes posture. It permeates the very way a being exists within space, influencing their every subtle movement and reaction, their every flicker of hope or despair.
So when that same dog was later moved to a new room, the one we first described, a room with a clear, low barrier, a literal way out, a visible path to hope, it carried that deeply ingrained belief with it.
The lesson stuck.
And that belief, forged in prior, inescapable suffering, became a cage far more powerful, far more impenetrable than any steel bars. It was an invisible barrier, a mental construct that completely negated the very possibility of escape, even when the physical means were plainly, overtly available.
It's a really poignant testament to the power of learned experience, isn't it?
It really is. When Martin Seligman and his team reviewed their startling results, what truly resonated with them, what truly stood out, wasn't just the mechanics of the experiment or the raw data.
No, it was the behavior.
It was the dog's profound behavior, or rather, the stark, chilling lack of it. Here was a dog, physically capable of escape, clearly possessing the strength and agility to leap over a low barrier, yet choosing not to move.
Why? Not because it had some perverse desire to suffer,
Of course not.
but because it had utterly lost its belief that its actions held any meaning, any power to change its circumstances. What's the one thing we need to understand about this moment that applies directly to us?
I think. The key takeaway, the truly profound insight here, is that it's not the pain that breaks us, but the meaning we assign to inescapable pain, the belief that our actions don't matter.
Exactly. What they observed was not merely a conditioned animal reacting to stimuli in a predictable way. It was a complex psychological state, one that strikingly resembled something deeply, tragically human.
It became a metaphor.
Precisely. In that pivotal moment, the experiment transcended mere data collection and evolved into something far larger, a potent metaphor. The dog, lying motionless on the electrified floor, became a poignant, almost heartbreaking stand-in for anyone who has stopped trying.
Right. Not because the problem is genuinely unsolvable.
No, but because they have, through repeated, painful, and often traumatic experience, stopped believing in the very possibility of solutions. They've given up on the idea of agency.
This, then, is the very heart of learned helplessness. It's crucial to understand that it's not about weakness, is it? It's not a lack of inherent courage or some fundamental defect in a person's character.
Not at all. It's profoundly about experience. When someone, be it an animal in a lab or a human navigating the complexities of life, is repeatedly exposed to negative outcomes that they cannot control, that defy their best efforts, they often, over time, come to believe that effort is simply useless.
And what makes this belief so insidious, so pervasive, so difficult to overcome, is that it can persist stubbornly, even when the external circumstances objectively change.
Right. Even when a clear, logical path to agency suddenly opens up, the past experience overrides present reality.
And that deeply ingrained belief can shape absolutely everything about a person's life, can't it?
It really can. It doesn't just dictate what a person does or doesn't do. It fundamentally alters what they think is possible for themselves, what they even dare to hope for.
How does that show up?
Well, this can manifest in relatively small ways, everyday occurrences that might go unnoticed by others, but which chip away at a person's vitality. Maybe avoiding new challenges at work, staying silent in a meeting where their voice could contribute valuable insight.
Or giving up on difficult conversations because it never goes anywhere, or they'll never listen.
Exactly those kinds of things, those small surrenders.
But the implications can also be far larger, life-altering, shaping the very trajectory of someone's entire existence.
Absolutely. We see it in individuals who remain trapped in toxic, even abusive relationships long past their expiration date. Or those who accept chronic unhappiness or persistent ill health as an unchangeable fate.
Or people who simply operate under the deeply pessimistic, self-fulfilling belief that nothing will ever truly change for them, regardless of their efforts. They might not even perceive the open doors in their lives.
That's right. The dogs in Seligman's lab weren't broken by the physical pain itself. While certainly agonizing, it was the devastating meaning they assigned to that pain, the crushing, inescapable idea that nothing they did made any discernible difference to their suffering.
That's what makes learned helplessness so insidious, so difficult to overcome from the outside. It's not a failure of physical strength or willpower.
No, it's a fundamental, often unconscious shift in perspective, a deep-seated decision to start reaching for the handle of a door that, unbeknownst to them, has already been unlocked. It's the ultimate psychological paradox. Freedom is present, but the belief in it is gone.
We, as observers, often fall into the trap of believing that people give up because they're inherently weak or lacking grit or determination. We've all heard the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
Absolutely, it's a common narrative. But the truth, as Seligman's work so starkly revealed, is often far more complex and, frankly, far more compassionate. People frequently give up not out of weakness.
But because they've been taught something else.
Exactly, because they've been taught through repeated, inescapable, and often traumatic experience that giving up is paradoxically safer than trying and failing again.
Safer.
Wow. Each failed attempt, each ignored struggle, each consequence of action that only brings more pain reinforces the lesson that effort is not rewarded and might even invite more suffering. It's a form of protective surrender.
Indeed, Seligman didn't initially set out to study despair or psychological suffering, did he?
No, his primary aim was to explore the mechanisms of classical conditioning. But what he stumbled upon was a profound discovery, a powerful insight. A psychological poison, if you will.
A psychological poison.
It's subtle, slow-acting, often completely unrecognized by those afflicted by it, and incredibly common, permeating many, many aspects of human behavior and societal structures.
And once you've been introduced to this concept, once you've seen it in action, you start recognizing it everywhere, don't you? In others, in the systems around us.
And sometimes, perhaps unsettlingly, even within yourself. It's a universal pattern of resignation born from repeated powerlessness.
So let's nail down what we mean when we talk about this powerful concept, just to ensure we're all on the same page. At its most concise, what is learned helplessness?
Learned helplessness is a psychological state in which a person comes to deeply believe that they have no control whatsoever over their situation, and this belief holds true even when, objectively, options for change are clearly present and available to them.
It's a self-imposed prison of perception.
It's a good way to put it. This term was first coined in the late 1960s by Martin Seligman, working alongside his colleague Stephen Mayer.
Okay.
At that particular time in the field of psychology, the prevailing paradigm was still heavily influenced by behaviorism. You know, the school of thought championed by figures like B.F. Skinner.
Stimulus response, right. Rewards and punishments.
Exactly. It proposed that all human and animal behavior could essentially be explained by straightforward conditioning, a direct, observable link between a stimulus and a response, reinforced by rewards or punishments. Seligman's initial experiments with dogs were actually designed to delve deeper into these very mechanisms.
But he found something else entirely.
He did. What he and his team uncovered pointed to something that behaviorism alone simply couldn't explain, something far more complex than simple stimulus response.
They observed that the dogs weren't merely reacting to the physical stimuli of the electric shocks in a simple mechanistic way, like a reflex.
No. Instead, their behavior was profoundly shaped by the meaning they had assigned to those stimuli specifically, the devastating meaning of inescapable pain.
So after being repeatedly exposed to unavoidable suffering, these dogs seemed to utterly give up. They ceased to try, even when a clear physical escape route was presented to them.
Right. Their inaction wasn't due to a lack of physical capability or a lack of energy, but because they had, through their painful experience, learned that trying was pointless.
This was a cognitive leap, a mental conclusion, not just a physical reaction.
Absolutely. And this finding directly challenged a fundamental assumption of behaviorism. The idea that organisms, including humans, would instinctively and always attempt to avoid discomfort or pain if they possibly could.
Seligman's research suggested a far more nuanced reality.
It showed that if an individual learns through a series of repeated and uncontrollable experiences that their actions, their efforts, simply do not make a difference in alleviating negative outcomes, they may eventually stop trying altogether.
And critically, this cessation of effort can persist even when circumstances change dramatically, right? Even when control objectively returns, or when new opportunities for escape become available.
It's as if their mental map of the world is irrevocably altered.
And the significance of this phenomenon extends far, far beyond the confines of a laboratory, far beyond the study of animal behavior.
Oh, absolutely. We see learned helplessness manifesting in countless real-world scenarios, in the painful realities of human existence.
Like where?
Well, it shows up in educational settings where students repeatedly fail despite genuine effort and conclude that studying is pointless or that they're simply not smart enough. It's observed within prisons and other institutional environments where individuals are stripped of autonomy and choice.
We see it in workplaces, where employees' creative ideas are consistently ignored or penalized. It's a factor in hospitals where patients feel disempowered, their voices unheard.
Exactly. And on a larger, more systemic scale, it's a critical component in chronic depression, addiction cycles, long-term patterns of domestic abuse, and even within the insidious dynamics of institutional oppression, where systemic powerlessness can crush individual agency on a mass scale.
In essence, the core insight of learned helplessness is profoundly important.
Well,
It's not truly about what is actually possible in a given situation.
no. Instead, it is fundamentally about what people believe is possible. And these beliefs, once deeply formed through repeated, often traumatic experience, can become incredibly entrenched and difficult to change.
They act as powerful, invisible barriers to action, to hope, and to a belief in one's own capacity for change. The real chains are often mental, not physical.
Precisely.
To truly appreciate the enormity of Seligman's discovery, which was nothing short of revolutionary, let's go back to the mid-1960s. Martin Seligman was a young, ambitious researcher at the University of Pennsylvania.
Right. His academic training was deeply rooted in classical conditioning, Pavlov's dogs, that sort of thing.
The idea that behavior could be shaped through learned associations between stimuli and responses. But Seligman's intellectual curiosity extended beyond mere reflexes, didn't it?
It did. He was fascinated by the deeper springs of motivation. Why do organisms choose to act? Or conversely, why do they sometimes choose not to act, even when circumstances seem to call for it? He was searching for something more profound than simple conditioned responses.
So in collaboration with his colleague Stephen Mayer, Seligman designed what seemed, on the surface, to be quite straightforward experiments, building on existing conditioning paradigms.
That's right. In the first phase, they took 3 distinct groups of dogs, each carefully restrained in harnesses within individual chambers. The first group served as a control. They were simply placed in the harness for a period and then released, experiencing no adverse stimuli, just establishing a baseline.
Okay, standard control.
The second group received electric shocks, but critically, they had a clear, immediate means to stop the shocks themselves by pressing a panel with their noses. They had direct control over their discomfort.
Agency. They could make it stop.
Exactly. But the third group, and this is where the profound discovery emerged, also received shocks. However, for this group, the shocks were completely uncontrollable.
How do they do that?
They were yoked to the second group, meaning they received shocks of the exact same intensity and duration. This was crucial, ensuring the pain level was identical across the shock groups, eliminating pain itself as a variable.
So it wasn't about more pain, it was about lack of control over the pain.
Precisely. For these dogs, there was absolutely no way to stop them, no panel to press, no action that would bring relief. For this third, truly powerless group, nothing worked. Whining didn't work, struggling didn't work, waiting didn't help. They were utterly, completely powerless.
That must have been truly distressing to witness.
Undoubtedly. Then, in the second phase of the experiment, all 3 groups of dogs were then placed one by one into a new environment. A shuttle box.
The box with the low barrier we talked about earlier.
The very same. Easily surmountable. Electric shocks were administered to the floor on one side of the barrier, and a simple jump over this barrier would immediately stop the shock, providing clear, instant relief. It was a classic avoidance learning test.
Designed to see if the dogs would quickly learn to escape the discomfort and move to safety.
Exactly.
What happened next was truly startling, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Defying conventional wisdom, challenging existing psychological theories.
And shocking the researchers themselves. The dogs from the first 2 groups, the control group, and the group that had learned to control their shocks, they quickly figured it out.
They jumped.
Without hesitation. When the floor buzzed, they'd leap over the barrier to the safe side, effectively avoiding or escaping the shock. This was precisely the expected behavior, a testament to their adaptive capacity.
But the shocker was group 3.
The shocker was group 3. These dogs, the ones who had endured uncontrollable shocks in the first phase, did not jump. They didn't even try.
What did they do?
When the current came on, instead of leaping to safety, they simply lay down on the shocking side, often whining softly, making no discernible effort to escape the pain. It was as if they had learned in that first inescapable phase that nothing they did mattered, that effort was futile, and that devastating belief carried over profoundly, even when a clear, easy physical solution was literally right in front of them.
The physical escape route was there, but the psychological one was gone.
Precisely.
This was the discovery. Seligman had, quite unintentionally, uncovered a fundamental psychological process, a learned pattern of response that transcended mere reflexes.
Right. He revealed that when individuals, whether animals or humans, are repeatedly exposed to situations in which the outcomes appear to be entirely uncontrollable, they may develop a deeply ingrained expectation of future lack of control.
And this expectation can stubbornly persist, often irrationally, even when the circumstances objectively change, and even when control is, in fact, available again.
It's not just about dogs reacting to pain in the moment. It was about a profound shift in mindset, a learned way of being in the world that prioritizes passive surrender over active struggle.
The implications of this discovery were enormous, weren't they?
Mhm.
Stretching far beyond the confines of experimental psychology.
Absolutely huge. Seligman's findings laid the foundational groundwork for decades of crucial research into complex human conditions like clinical depression, various anxiety disorders, the lingering effects of trauma, and the dynamics of behavioral change.
It became undeniably clear that helplessness was not merely a passive response to hardship or a simple lack of motivation.
No, rather it was a learned expectation, a cognitive framework, a mental model that, once established, could be incredibly difficult to overcome.
However, the hopeful flip side was also illuminated. This learned expectation could, in fact, be unlearned.
But often only with significant time, consistent support, and targeted intervention. What began as a somewhat technical study in behaviorist conditioning had, in an unexpected turn, opened a critical door into understanding human despair and, perhaps more importantly, pointed directly toward new and hopeful paths out of it.
When Seligman published his groundbreaking findings, they didn't just expand the existing field of psychology, they fundamentally challenged one of its core, most deeply held assumptions, didn't they?
They really did. Up to that point, as we mentioned, psychology was largely dominated by behaviorism, stimulus, response, external factors.
Yeah, thinkers like Skinner argued that all behavior could be understood through external stimuli and consequences. The inner workings of the mind, thoughts, beliefs, expectations, were often treated as a black box.
Inaccessible, unmeasurable, irrelevant to scientific study. What mattered were the observable inputs and the measurable outputs.
But learned helplessness unequivocally did not fit neatly into that behaviorist model.
Not at all. If the dogs were merely reacting in a purely mechanistic way to external stimuli, then when they were presented with a new, avoidable threat in the shuttle box, they should have immediately tried to escape. Their instinct for self-preservation should have kicked in.
But they didn't. They acted as though they still had no control, as if their efforts were entirely futile.
Exactly. This meant that their behavior wasn't solely about the physical shock itself. It was profoundly about what they had learned about the shock. They had formed clear expectations about the predictability, or rather, the unpredictability and uncontrollability of their environment.
They had internalized deep-seated beliefs about their ability to influence their surroundings. They were no longer just reacting.
They were predicting, and based on those bleak predictions, they were giving up.
This profound insight, this undeniable evidence of internal processing of a mind that wasn't just reacting, but interpreting, helped catalyze a much broader and ultimately revolutionary shift in psychology.
Right. It propelled the field away from pure, rigid behaviorism and towards a more nuanced, comprehensive cognitive approach. Researchers began to take seriously the vital role of perception, the power of belief, and the influence of complex mental frameworks in shaping behavior.
It suddenly became clear that it wasn't enough to simply look at what objectively happened to people.
It was just as critically important to ask what people thought was happening and, perhaps most powerfully, what they believed they could do about it.
In this burgeoning new view, the mind was no longer considered a passive recorder of events.
No, it was revealed as an active, dynamic interpreter of reality. And that interpretation, that internal narrative, could lead an individual either to profound hope and active engagement or to crushing despair and profound resignation sometimes, quite strikingly, regardless of the objective facts of their external reality.
The internal landscape could be more powerful than the external one. This was far more than a mere theoretical development in the academic world, though. This fundamental shift laid the crucial groundwork for entirely new forms of therapy, most notably cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
That's right. CBT, which has become one of the most widely used and effective therapeutic approaches, specifically focuses on identifying and actively challenging distorted or unhelpful beliefs about control, agency, and self-worth.
Seligman's pioneering work had powerfully demonstrated that helplessness could be learned, that it was the patterned response, not an inherent trait. The next and most compelling question that emerged was, if it can be learned.
Can it also then be unlearned? And what would that unlearning look like? That became the crucial next step.
To understand why learned helplessness is so incredibly persistent, why it has the power to override logic, to suppress memory, and even to silence our most basic survival instincts, we need to delve into the very biological machinery of the brain, don't we?
We really do. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a profound, measurable reality. Chronic, ongoing stress doesn't merely make people feel bad, it literally changes how the brain functions. It alters its very structure, its chemical balance, its neural pathways. It rewires the organ itself.
Okay, so what parts of the brain are involved?
One of the key players in this complex neurological drama is the amygdala, often called the brain's emotional alarm system. Its job is to detect threats and trigger responses like fear and anxiety.
Right, the fight or flight center.
Exactly. Under conditions of constant, unrelenting stress, the kind that induces learned helplessness, the amygdala becomes overactive, perpetually on high alert. It starts to interpret even neutral stimuli, everyday things, as threats.
So the world starts to feel inherently hostile, dangerous, even when it might not be.
Precisely. Every shadow seems to hide a threat. Meanwhile, another critical part, the hippocampus, which is vital for memory formation, especially for facts and events and context,
What happens to that?
it actually begins to shrink under chronic stress. This shrinkage profoundly impacts an individual's ability to place events in their proper context, to form coherent narratives of their experiences, and to learn from the past.
So things feel disconnected, maybe overwhelming.
Yes. People under long-term stress often report difficulty remembering what happened just before a traumatic event, or anticipating what might come next. Every experience feels immediate, urgent, overwhelming, detached from a broader timeline, making it hard to see patterns of improvement or decline.
But perhaps the most significant and debilitating changes occur in the prefrontal cortex. That's the brain's executive suite, right?
Yeah.
Responsible for reasoning, planning, decision-making.
That's the one, the CEO of cognitive function. Under the relentless assault of long-term stress and the constant reinforcement of powerlessness, this vital region loses its connectivity and its efficiency. Its neural circuits become less robust, less effective.
So in simpler terms, the more helpless someone feels, the harder it literally becomes for their brain to think clearly, to plan ahead, or imagine alternatives.
Exactly. It's like the brain's problem-solving department goes offline. This creates a cruel, self-perpetuating, vicious cycle.
How so?
The chronic stress reduces the brain's ability to regulate itself, to calm its own alarm systems, to reason through challenges. That, in turn, makes the stress even harder to escape, deepening the feeling of powerlessness.
So people stop exploring, questioning, hoping. Not because they want to, but because their brain is reinforcing the idea that escape is impossible.
Precisely. Their brain is telling them, quite literally, there's no point. And to compound this, we have to add the pervasive, almost toxic role of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone.
I thought cortisol was helpful in stress.
In small, regulated doses, it is. It helps us react quickly to immediate danger, fight or flight. But when cortisol levels remain chronically elevated for too long, as they do in learned helplessness, it becomes truly toxic.
Toxic how?
It impairs immune function, disrupts sleep patterns, and critically for our discussion, it actually damages the very brain circuits involved in learning and memory. It's a double-edged sword that starts to destroy the systems it was meant to protect.
So these neurological shifts, these biological adaptations, help explain why learned helplessness isn't just a fleeting mindset. It's a deeply entrenched neurobiological state.
Exactly. One in which the brain has literally adapted to hopelessness, embracing it as if it were some form of perverse safety, a stable, albeit painful, equilibrium. It's profound physiological change.
And like any deeply wired adaptation, it doesn't just disappear with a flick of a switch. It requires effort to alter.
But knowing this, truly understanding the biological underpinnings, also swings open the door to something immensely hopeful.
Which is?
If helplessness is indeed learned, if it's physically encoded, wired into the very circuitry of our brains, then perhaps with sufficient time, the right conditions, and deliberate effort, it can in fact be rewired.
The brain can change back.
This understanding shifts our perspective from despair to a clear pathway of potential change, demonstrating that the brain, while adaptable to hardship, is also adaptable to healing.
Let's talk more about that stress feedback loop. When we typically talk about stress, we think of it as temporary, right? A response to pressure or a crisis.
Usually, yes. But in the context of learned helplessness, stress morphs into something far more enduring and pervasive. It becomes an insidious, self-sustaining feedback loop, with cortisol sitting squarely at its center, constantly signaling danger and futility.
Cortisol, the main stress hormone, released by the adrenal glands in response to a threat, helps mobilize energy, sharpens focus, the fight-or-flight response. It's adaptive in the short term.
Incredibly adaptive and life-saving in acute situations. But when that stress becomes chronic, when the body and brain are exposed to continuous threat signals, day in, day out, without relief, the cortisol system doesn't disengage as it should.
It stays active.
Relentlessly active, perpetually flooding the brain and body with biochemical signals that scream a consistent message. You're not safe. Stay on high alert. Don't trust anything. Don't relax. This constant internal alarm profoundly impacts our perception of reality.
And over time, this sustained biochemical state literally reshapes how we form and retrieve memories, you said, affecting the hippocampus.
That's right. Under chronic stress, the hippocampus becomes less effective, less precise. It struggles to categorize and store information correctly. This can manifest as fragmented, emotionally charged memories.
Like certain details are vivid, but others are lost or suppressed, leading to confusion.
Exactly. Events blur together, context fades, and the individual begins to deeply doubt their own perceptions. Did it really happen that way? Am I exaggerating? Did I try hard enough? It creates a deep internal distrust.
And this distortion of memory isn't just a side effect. It powerfully reinforces the cycle of helplessness.
Absolutely. If you genuinely cannot remember instances when things improved, or even whether they ever did, if your brain suppresses memories of past successes or agency, you're inherently less likely to believe that positive change is even possible in the future,
The past becomes unreliable, offering no evidence of progress.
leaving you feeling perpetually stuck. Even worse, chronic cortisol exposure also negatively impacts the brain's ability to recognize and process patterns accurately. It can lead to overgeneralization.
How does that work?
A single painful or futile experience starts to feel like a permanent, immutable truth. One failed attempt becomes a universal rule. Nothing ever works, everything is destined to fail, I always mess things up.
That single negative data point gets extrapolated to all future possibilities, closing off avenues before they're even explored.
Precisely, and this is how the insidious cortisol loop works, creating a devastating, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, break it down.
1. Stressful, uncontrollable experiences consistently raise cortisol levels. 2. Elevated cortisol, in turn, distorts memory and perception, creating a skewed, negative reality. 3. This distorted memory and perception then powerfully reinforce the belief that effort is futile.
Makes sense.
4. That deeply ingrained belief in futility directly leads to more passivity and, ironically, more stress, as the individual feels increasingly trapped. And 5. The cycle repeats, becoming tragically self-validating, each turn reinforcing the hopelessness.
The profound tragedy is its self-reinforcing nature. The more helpless someone feels, the more their brain literally gathers evidence to confirm that very feeling. It's a closed system of despair.
But understanding this complex neurobiological process is crucially the very first step in actively breaking it. It serves as a powerful reminder that helplessness is not simply an elusive emotional feeling or a character flaw, it's a tangible chemical state.
With measurable effects on how we perceive the world, ourselves, and what we believe is possible.
And like any such state, with the right conditions and consistent effort, it can indeed begin to change. Because the brain, remarkably, is always capable of new learning.
That brings us to one of the most important and truly empowering discoveries in modern neuroscience. The brain is not fixed. It has this extraordinary ability to change, adapt, rewire itself throughout life.
Neuroplasticity.
Exactly. For a very long time, scientists largely believed the brain developed mostly in childhood and then remained static. You got the brain you got, and that was it.
But we know that's wrong now.
Completely overturned. We now definitively know the brain continues to actively rewire itself throughout our entire lives. New neural connections form, old pathways weaken, and even deeply ingrained beliefs, habits, and emotional responses can shift dramatically, even later in life.
This understanding is profoundly relevant to learned helplessness, isn't it? Because if helplessness is learned, then it's something the brain has physically wired into its architecture. Yes, Repeated experiences of failure, powerlessness, or unpredictability don't just affect mood. They literally carve mental grooves, establishing preferred pathways. Circuits for exploration, curiosity, motivation grow quiet.
While circuits related to withdrawal, passivity, resignation grow stronger, becoming the default response. The brain optimizes for futility.
But here's the absolutely critical point, the profound hope embedded in this. The very same mechanism of neuroplasticity that inadvertently created learned helplessness can also, astonishingly, undo it.
So the brain can adapt not just to despair, but also to hope, to safety, to new outcomes.
It's a two-way street. The brain can learn despair, but it can also learn agency.
How does that unlearning process work? Is it quick?
It's often slow, typically nonlinear, and profoundly dependent on context. Someone who spent years learning to expect failure won't suddenly change after one success. However, with repeated, small, and consistent experiences of genuine control, those crucial moments where an action demonstrably leads to a meaningful, positive result, the brain gradually begins to shift its fundamental operating model, like rerouting a river, drop by drop.
How does that internal shift start?
Often subtly, with renewed, hesitant attention. Noticing actions matter, even in tiny ways. Trying a new route saved time, speaking up was heard. The brain slowly re-engages dormant circuits for initiative, exploration.
And chemically?
The neurotransmitter dopamine, linked with reward and motivation, begins to rise again, signaling that effort can lead to positive outcomes. I want to try that again. A spark of curiosity returns, then tentative initiative.
This neuroscientific understanding underpins effective therapies like CBT and exposure therapy, doesn't it?
Precisely. They're built on this principle. They gently but consistently help people test long-held negative expectations against new realities. Structured exercises, small behavioral experiments, real-world engagements allow new, positive patterns of cause and effect to take hold. It's a systematic retraining of the brain.
But it's crucial to understand that this change isn't solely about individual willpower or purely internal work. The external environment matters immensely.
Critically, reliable support matters just as much, if not more, than individual grit. If someone remains stuck in a context where nothing they do seems to make a difference, their brain continues to learn that lesson.
So true. Lasting unlearning often requires more than just inner transformation. It might need a fundamental change in the world around us.
We can't ask a bird to fly if its cage remains closed.
Neuroplasticity doesn't promise sudden miracles then, but it offers something valuable, measurable hope.
It affirms that the human mind is never completely and irrevocably stuck. It always retains the capacity for change, for growth, for new learning, for finding new pathways out of old prisons.
And that even deeply rooted beliefs like I can't or it's no use trying aren't permanent aspects of our being.
At their core, they are simply neural patterns, pathways reinforced by past experiences. And patterns, once illuminated, once understood as learned responses, not inherent truths, can absolutely be changed, rewired, and transformed. That's the scientific optimism here.
At the very heart of learned helplessness lies a deeply personal and profound question. Do I have any control over what truly happens to me?
It's a fundamental psychological necessity, isn't it? That belief in personal control shapes how we interpret events, cope with setbacks, imagine our future. Without it, the world feels chaotic.
But trauma, particularly when it is repeated, unpredictable, or utterly inescapable, shatters that fundamental belief.
It really does. When someone experiences such profound trauma, their brain's intrinsic sense of agency is deeply affected. They might physically survive, but psychologically, the expectation of control breaks down. The mind essentially says, my efforts don't matter here.
And that breakdown, that loss of agency, isn't irrational in the context of their experience. It is, in fact, learned based on brutal, lived reality.
Absolutely. Consider a child in a consistently volatile household, where outbursts or punishments come without warning or pattern. That child may learn not to speak up, not because silence works, but because they learn nothing they do makes a positive difference. And sometimes speaking up makes things worse.
Or a patient who endures failed treatment after failed treatment. They might stop advocating for themselves, silenced by repeated disappointment.
Or someone trapped in persistent poverty might see effort applying for jobs, seeking assistance as pointless, because every attempt is met with setback, bureaucracy, or systemic indifference.
Over time, this sense of I can influence my environment is replaced by a chilling realization. My environment controls me. I am merely a pawn.
Exactly. This shift is what makes trauma so powerful. It's not just the event, but how it teaches the brain to expect more of the same, to anticipate continued helplessness. It reshapes how the world is perceived through a lens of futility.
And it's important to understand this isn't merely about fear, though fear is present. It's more deeply about predictability.
Right. When life devolves into random blows, the mind adapts by constantly bracing for impact. Even in calm moments, the body remains tense, the mind closed. Opportunities feel like potential traps,
Because trying has consistently led to more suffering.
which is why this state is often deeply misunderstood by outsiders. People ask, why doesn't she leave? Or why doesn't he fight back?
But the answer, more often than not, isn't about a lack of courage. It's fundamentally about a deeply ingrained belief.
A learned conviction. If someone has been taught again and again that effort doesn't matter, that resistance is futile or dangerous, then not acting may feel like the only rational, safe choice. It's a twisted logic born of experience.
That, then, is the cruel logic of learned helplessness. It paradoxically begins as a survival strategy, an adaptation to an unbearable reality.
But over time, it transforms into a self-imposed prison maintained not by external force, but by a relentless expectation of continued powerlessness, even when the external walls have come down.
And escaping this invisible prison requires far more than simply telling someone they objectively have a choice.
It requires a profound, patient, consistent effort to help them believe it again, to truly internalize the possibility of agency, even in the smallest steps. That's where the real work begins.
One of the brain's most fundamental functions, something it does constantly, is prediction, right? Anticipating what happens next to conserve energy and ensure safety.
Constantly. Predicting outcomes allows us to prepare, adapt, optimize responses. It applies to everything from estimating a car's distance to how people treat us or whether our efforts yield results.
But what happens when the brain's predictions repeatedly, consistently fail? This mismatch is called prediction error.
Normally, prediction errors are how we learn. Touch a hot pan unexpectedly, you learn. Check next time, it's adaptive feedback.
However, when outcomes are random, unpredictable, or consistently negative despite sustained effort, the learning goes in a damaging direction.
Exactly. Imagine a child studies hard, understands the material, and still fails. Studies harder, fails again and again.
Their brain learns not. Try a different study method, but a devastating lesson. Trying doesn't work. My effort is irrelevant. I'm just not capable.
They cease to update their strategy. They update their belief in themselves. This is the dangerous side of prediction error and learned helplessness.
When efforts meet unpredictable or punishing outcomes, the brain adjusts to stop trying at all.
And this is not laziness. From the brain's perspective, it's cold, hard, learned logic, an adaptation to an environment where effort is unrewarded or punished.
It's the nervous system sending a powerful message. Trying is unsafe. It leads to disappointment. Better to expect nothing. So, we withdraw.
A survival mechanism that tragically becomes a prison. This pattern is especially common in environments with no clear, consistent feedback loop.
Like arbitrary institutions, unpredictable relationships, inconsistent workplaces.
Precisely. Situations where decisions seem random, responses are erratic, effort goes unnoticed or penalized. It fosters a feeling of being at the mercy of forces beyond control.
Over time, the brain constructs a new internal model. Outcomes are random. I have no influence. Trying makes it worse.
And this internal model remains stubbornly in place even if circumstances objectively change. The person doesn't even test the waters.
Because they have learned that the water bites, their brain's predictive model tells them it's futile and they don't challenge it.
This is precisely why telling someone suffering from learned helplessness to simply just try harder often tragically fails and can even be counterproductive.
It completely ignores the learning history, the years of uncontrollable negative experiences that shaped their current beliefs.
It's like telling someone with a broken leg to just run faster. It ignores the underlying injury.
So breaking through isn't about pushing action, but about rebuilding that predictive model within the brain.
Gradually, safely, consistently, until the brain slowly, tentatively begins to expect something different, something positive, responsive, validating.
That profound shift doesn't happen quickly, but once it truly begins, everything can start to change.
Because when the brain relearns that effort can matter again, the world becomes more hopeful, more predictable, and fundamentally safer to engage with again, opening up possibilities that were once invisible.
Learned helplessness isn't just an abstract theory. It tragically shows up in some of the most painful corners of human life where control is persistently denied or stripped away.
One of the clearest examples is clinical depression. It's often described as sadness or low energy, but at its core, for many, lies a crippling belief. Nothing will truly help.
Not therapy, not connection, not their own efforts.
Right. Seligman linked some forms of depression directly to chronic, uncontrollable stress that teaches the brain to give up. People with depression often aren't passive because they don't care. They're passive because they've learned caring doesn't change anything. It's deep hopelessness.
Another tragic example is domestic violence. Outsiders struggle to understand why victims stay.
Many survivors describe a pattern chillingly similar to Seligman's dogs. Early attempts to resist or escape fail, often escalating violence or leading to inescapable consequences.
After enough failed attempts, they stop trying, normalizing the abuse, even blaming themselves.
It's psychological conditioning repeated futility. Abusers often reinforce it with cycles of violence and affection. Resistance brings pain. Compliance offers fragile peace. Autonomy fades. Hope shrinks. The cage becomes internal.
Then there's institutionalization prisons, psychiatric hospitals, care homes, large bureaucracies.
In such systems, individuals are frequently stripped of meaningful choice. Fixed schedules, restricted movement, arbitrary rules. Personal initiative seems pointless. Even basic requests may go unanswered.
So people doubt their own preferences, stop asking, stop initiating. They just wait for instruction.
Exactly. This is systemic learned helplessness, not single trauma, but structural powerlessness. It erodes initiative, creativity, self-trust, and the effects linger even after release.
Difficulty making choices, holding jobs. Not because they're incapable, but because they were taught choices don't matter.
Precisely. They learned acting on their own initiative is pointless or dangerous.
Understanding this is crucial. When someone doesn't act, the question isn't always, what's wrong with you? Often the better question is, what have you been through that taught you it wouldn't matter?
That shift in perspective is key to unlocking solutions and fostering genuine empathy.
If helplessness can be learned, then the hopeful counter question is, can resilience be learned too?
That's a profoundly important question. For decades, resilience, bouncing back from adversity, was thought to be largely innate. You either had it or you didn't.
But that view changed.
Radically. Today, we understand resilience not as a fixed trait, but as a dynamic set of cultivable skills and conditions that can be developed over time.
And Martin Seligman himself, after studying despair, shifted his focus.
He did. He turned his attention to optimism, agency, psychological strength, laying the groundwork for positive psychology, a field focused on fostering mental flourishing. And a core tool is cognitive reframing.
Cognitive reframing.
Okay.
It's not just pretending things are better.
Not at all. It's a deliberate process of challenging the deeply ingrained belief that negative circumstances will never change. When helpless, thinking tends towards absolutes. This always happens. Nothing ever works.
Thoughts that feel factual but are often distorted.
Exactly. Reframing invites examining those beliefs critically but compassionately. Is it always this way or just that time? What's different now? Have I ever succeeded, even in small ways? It pokes holes in those absolute statements.
The effect isn't magic, but it begins to loosen the grip of helplessness by restoring possibility.
It chips away at the belief that change is impossible, introducing nuance. Research shows people who practice reframing recover faster, try again, resist passivity.
But this often requires supportive environments, right? Therapists, mentors, friends, programs.
Absolutely critical. Safe spaces to reflect, challenge assumptions, experiment with new thinking without fear.
We see this in practice.
Yes, in schools with growth mindset, training ability isn't fixed, it can be developed. I'm not good at math yet. In therapy, maybe writing exercises to rewrite narratives, focusing on agency, or gentle exposure to gather contradictory evidence.
The common goal is helping people see their circumstances and themselves differently.
Shifting the internal narrative from futility to potential agency. Because the most debilitating aspect isn't suffering itself, but the belief it's permanent.
Reframing doesn't erase pain, but reminds us the future isn't yet written. That belief alone can be powerful medicine.
Healing from learned helplessness is rarely just about willpower. It almost always requires structural support, tangible ways to rebuild the sense that action leads to positive outcomes.
This is where therapy, choice architecture, and social design come in.
Exactly. Let's start with therapy, specifically CBT. It recognizes helplessness as cognitive, built from ingrained thought patterns and core beliefs.
So CBT identifies these patterns and tests them against reality.
Precisely. For someone thinking nothing I do matters, CBT creates structured, repeatable moments of action and observable response. A therapist helps plan a small, achievable task, maybe slightly challenging.
Like making a difficult phone call.
Yes. Then they meticulously reflect on what happened, the outcome. If it's even marginally positive, that experience becomes new data for the brain, countering the old narrative, slowly rewriting the predictive model.
But therapy isn't universally accessible, and not all environments are therapeutic. Many actively undermine agency.
Which is why broader, systemic approaches are vital. This brings us to choice architecture,
The idea that how options are presented shapes behavior.
popularized by Thaler and Sunstein. The core idea: people are more likely to act when the path is clear, simple, affirming. It's about making the beneficial choice the easiest or most obvious one, not forcing it.
What does that look like in practice?
Maybe pre-scheduling crucial appointments instead of requiring complex opt-ins. Radically simplifying bureaucratic processes for benefits or licenses. Redesigning classrooms or workplaces to emphasize feedback, agency, clarity, rather than control and compliance.
So in settings where people feel powerless, hospitals, prisons, schools, public offices, even small shifts in choice structure can have major effects.
Huge effects. Giving patients choices in meals, prisoners in recreation, students in demonstrating learning. Predictable options with visible consequences help the brain relearn the link between decision and outcome. It rebuilds the model of agency.
This broadens to social design, asking how we build systems, educational, legal, economic, that don't just treat helplessness, but prevent it.
Yes. How can we design societies to cultivate agency? The answer often involves transparency, genuine participation, and upholding human dignity.
Like involving students in learning decisions, restorative justice over punishment, shared decision-making in healthcare.
Exactly. These aren't abstract ideals. They're concrete interventions grounded in psychological research. They represent a shift from control to empowerment.
Ultimately, when systems acknowledge people's capacity for choice and change, people believe in their own power.
And that belief, once restored, can do what punishment and persuasion cannot. Help someone step forward because they believe they can.
Not all stories of learned helplessness end in resignation, thankfully. There are countless narratives of reversal, of paths back to agency.
Inspiring stories of people who found their way out of the cage, step by small step. Often not dramatic breakthroughs, but quiet, deliberate progress.
Can you share an example?
Take a woman trapped for years in an abusive relationship. Believed she was weak, no options. Early escape attempts failed, reinforcing fear. What changed wasn't a grand act, but finding a local support group.
Just being there.
At first, just listening, then speaking, finding validation. Then, almost without realizing its significance, she applied for a part-time job, a small independent act.
And they gave her
A reason, tangible evidence, to believe her choices mattered again, that she could affect change.
Or consider the man unemployed for a decade, confidence eroded, stopped trying, believed skills useless.
A local employment initiative, focusing on small steps, matched him with a part-time volunteer role. Few hours, no pressure stocking library books.
Seemingly insignificant.
But that small task led to a recommendation, then a job offer. It was the positive feedback from a small, consistent act that rewired his belief.
These moments aren't cinematic, but mark a profound shift in the internal model. A reversal of, nothing I do makes a difference.
The brain receives new data. Wait, maybe my actions do have an impact.
What are the common catalysts for these reversals?
Diverse but patterns emerge, sometimes relational. A teacher who refuses to give up, a mentor who listens, a kind stranger offering dignity.
Or environmental?
Yes. A new workplace fostering autonomy, a safer neighborhood, an empathetic program creating space for agency. The common pattern isn't a formula, but a small, manageable act of agency.
Followed by a clear positive response.
Reinforced by repetition, consistency, and supportive validation.
This pattern helps the brain unlearn helplessness by living, moment by moment, in a different story.
Where effort leads to outcome, actions have meaning, choice matters. It's a slow, gentle, powerful transformation.
These reversals don't erase the past.
No, scars often remain, but they create space for the slow reappearance of possibility, the fragile return of trust in the world, in others, and crucially, in oneself.
And once someone begins to believe again that what they do matters, the invisible cage begins to dissolve.
Not all at once, but perhaps enough to take the first real tentative step forward, and then another.
So we often think freedom is primarily about external circumstances, about locked doors finally opening. We search for the external key.
But as we've seen in this deep dive, for many, the real most powerful barrier isn't a physical lock or a tangible obstacle.
It's far more insidious.
It's the profound, learned belief that those doors don't open at all, that they are permanently sealed, or even worse, the devastating belief that they were never ever meant for them in the first place.
That freedom or change exists for others, but not for you.
Exactly. That deep-seated exclusion.
And here's where it gets really interesting, where the hope resides. The very fact that helplessness is learned means fundamentally that it can absolutely be unlearned.
It's a challenge, yes, a profound one, but it's not a permanent sentence, it's a pattern. And patterns can be broken.
The path out rarely begins with a grand revelation, does it?
No, rarely. It often starts with something far quieter. A tiny crack in the old story where a small act has an unexpectedly positive result. Or perhaps kindness appears where only indifference was expected.
A flicker of connection.
Those are the crucial, fragile moments that sow the seeds of change, that make transformation possible, inviting the brain to recalibrate its predictions.
What might shift in your own life, what new possibilities might emerge if you began to truly believe that a door, which you once thought was sealed shut and locked tight, might actually unexpectedly be open for you?